Hey Luke.
Hey, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Dad, thanks. Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, same to you.
Yeah, it's been an interesting 12 months as well as,
Mm.
yeah, nice little break over Christmas. Although for me it was busy.
I can imagine. Yeah, that'd probably be your busiest time, hey?
Yeah, always end of the year into the new year, I'm doing the year ahead readings for people. So I've
Mm.
done about 152 of those now. And yeah, there's a high demand for that. People want to get a bit of a bigger understanding of how they're going to navigate through the year ahead. So
Mm.
obviously there's a lot of shifts coming in 2025, but it's about then guiding the person how they're going to move through that based on their birth chart.
I actually rewatched the one that we did end of the year
Ah,
last year.
oh, really?
And you know when you rewatch something and then you absorb even more?
Yep.
It was just so good. You really found your niche. It really helped me.
Awesome.
So, yeah. And I can't believe it's been a year already since I last had you on. It's kind of scary how quick time flies. Yeah.
I was thinking maybe we do these every 6 months or something, just to sort of,
Done.
yeah. I'll talk about the year.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff is happening between now and July, and then July forward is integrating what's happened in that period of time. We're in a bit of a sluggish start to the year. When we look astrologically to understand why that might be the case, the planet of action, Mars, is retrograde. So its retrograde cycle is the least common. Last retrograde cycle was through Gemini, and that was when Elon Musk took over Twitter. I saw some news a day or so ago. We'll talk about this separately with regards to news and stuff like that. But I saw a news article recently that said that he's thinking of purchasing TikTok. I was like,
Wow.
oh, retrograde of Mars, like a takeover.
Hmm.
But when Mars is retrograde every 2.5 years or so, that's the planet of action, motivation, desire, assertion. When we initiate things, it's what Mars represents is an externalization of our will into this physical world.
Hmm.
In tarot, Mars is the tower card, so it can be quite a destructive force. But when a planet retrogrades, the motion or the energy or what it represents isn't outwardly expressed anymore. It's more of an internal expression of that energy. So if you're looking for drive, motivation, stamina, it's sort of like Mars's retrograde. It's like, oh God, like why is it hard to get going? Why is it, it's like a cold car in the morning. You got to sort of sit there for a bit to get it warmed up.
Yeah.
But yeah, the idea with these cycles, once we become aware of them, is to utilize them for what they represent. And it's a sort of a reevaluation of what we want.
Hmm.
And based on what we want, because Mars being one of the planets of desire, it's like, well, how do we go about getting what I want? And what I found for a lot of people over this last 6 months, because the retrograde cycle of Mars is about a 7 month process, by the time it moves into the degrees in which it will return to through its retrograde. So it moved into 17 degrees of Cancer in October last year.
Hmm.
And that's where it's retrograding back to. And currently it's about 26 degrees of Cancer. So it's got until the 24th of February before it hits the 24th, the 17th degree of Cancer. So that's the sort of retrograde cycle. And then it's going to turn direct, but it's got to track back over the same part of the sky, part of your chart that it did since October. So that won't complete until we get into about the end of April into May. So it's
Mm.
October 2024 to May 2025, we have a retrograding Mars cycle. And because out of all the planets, it's the least common, it's more impactful. It's like, oh God, what's actually happening? What are we doing? Are we doing this? Is this what I want? A lot of people have found that they've either gone, I don't want that anymore, but I'm not sure what I want. Or they're just having that sort of like moment of like, maybe it's there, but maybe it's not really clear in the
Mm.
direction to take and the way to go about it. Today, actually, over the next 24 to 48 hours, we'll have the sun in opposition to Mars, which is the halfway point of its cycle. So once we reach that, you could reach the peak point of its cycle, we'll start to be more integrating of this Mars energy. So it's a little bit more, determined, driven, inspired to maybe start a new path or take a new direction. The interesting thing about this Mars retrograde cycle is it's making an opposition to the planet Pluto. And Pluto, you could look at, is like another octave of Mars on a lower sort of frequency. Really represents primal urge, primal desire, and almost like that deep unconscious desire of the soul. So if you've got the deep unconscious desire of the soul, and then you've got the sort of ego-driven desire of the ego and the self, which is the Mars, in opposition to each other, it's like, I want this, and then the soul can intervene and go, that's not really what we want. So it's a battle going on, and the peaks of that opposition, we had one in November, right at the very beginning of November, right as we had a massive transition of power in the US, right? The US election was on the 5th or 6th of November. That was pretty much tracking the Mars-Pluto opposition, and it was a big transition of power, the shifting from the Democrat back to the Republic. The second Mars-Pluto opposition came as we entered into the new year, and it was about the 3rd of January, but it would have been felt that first week. And then the final Mars-Pluto opposition won't be until the end of April. And April's going to come up in this session a bit because it's a bit of a asterisk around, March, April in particular.
Mm.
But it's interesting to sort of track this retrograde cycle of Mars, what it's meaning and what it represents. And then this Pluto, it sort of accentuates or punctuates that cycle a little bit, as did yesterday's full moon, because it was conjunct the retrograding Mars. So, we're confronting ego self as well, like the ego self and the patterns of behavior and the conditioning that have reinforced that identity. So a lot of people would be going through identity shifts or identity crisis, or like, I don't want that, but I don't want to be that person. And sometimes too, when we change what we want, you got to understand, or if we, a better way to explain this is if you don't want to be that person anymore, let's say you want to evolve into a newer version of yourself or a better version or a more authentic version or whatever that might look like, you got to understand that the old version of you built up a life and a reality for it to live in based on what it wanted. And if you decide to become a new version of yourself and do some self-transformative work, more alignment to your deeper soul's desires, you're going to confront the parts of your reality that were built up by the old desires of the older self. And that can be challenging because you can be like, oh, I don't want this anymore. And maybe this is a job that you've, worked hard for, or a career path that you've put your energy towards, or maybe it's a relationship that you're realizing this isn't me anymore. I don't want
Mm.
me, but that me, the old me, that's the relationship they're in. So that's what I do with my clients is I help them through those types of transitions to bring awareness and, you know, help bring some certainty to them when they're in that place of, oh, what the fuck's going on?
Yeah.
So
I find a lot of people are starting to break away from society's programmings, but we're still tethered in a way, and there's this kind of push and pull going on.
100%. And I feel like it's going to accelerate exponentially this year. I've said to a lot of people for some time now, use the first 3 to 4 months of 2025 to prepare for the middle of 2025 to get where you need to be and do what you need to do and make the changes you need to make so that you're in a place that as the collective changes and the awareness and the consciousness of the collective changes and the impact that will have, you're in a place that you can navigate that. And I would expect there to be a lot of chaos. And when people hear that term, they think, oh, chaos. The better way to frame is just things happening that just unexpected and then there's no way to predict it. It's like, what? Like shock and awe and things happening, especially as we get into the middle of 2025, Uranus moves into Gemini and Gemini slash Mercury, that's the sign of speed.
Mhm.
So if you look to the Nike tick on the shoe or the Nike symbol, it's the wing off the Mercury's either his hat or his shoe.
Mm.
He's got wings on his shoes because he's the speedy planet. So
Mhm.
Gemini is a sign of change, information, and also perception, awareness, thoughts, and thinking. And then Uranus brings sudden disruptive changes. So we've had Uranus now in Taurus since 2018, so governed over by Venus. And what's been happening from 2018 to now is our attachment to material desire and values has shifted dramatically. But it hasn't necessarily been a profound external sort of representation of that. But you could say what we collectively desired and wanted in the sense of material possessions and wealth and those types of things and our drives that were material bound 2018 to now, we've shifted completely. It's radically changed. So that type of sort of change is what Uranus can represent. And then it's going to move into the air sign of Gemini, which is a mutable sign. It's about things happening. Like, so it's all going on, you know. If you know any Geminis, they can switch conversations to things really quickly and they can pick up things really quickly. They're really smart with their mind and the way they see things.
Mm.
Often too, they can be having a whole conversation in their mind before they involve you in it, and then they can be saying things, and you're like, "What are you actually talking about?" And they're like, "Oh, oh." So, you know, the mind and the thought process can be thick. We can think of something, and I can program or suggest or implant an idea or information, and then it shifts the thinking really fast. So
Mm.
when Uranus moves into Gemini this year in July, I'd expect there to be a lot of change, rapid, unexpected, almost chaotic change. Like I
Mm.
wasn't expecting it, you know.
Like in the world, you mean? Like at a world
Yeah,
level?
yeah, out in this world. When we're dealing with Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, Saturn and Jupiter to a degree, but Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus are always going to represent, you know, energy out in the world. They operate on a personal level, more of an unconscious point. So another thing that's occurring in 2025 is we already have Pluto into Aquarius. It's been in there on and off since March of 2023. Um, in November of 2024, Pluto finally moved into Aquarius for good. It's not going to return back to Capricorn. So everyone alive now, no more Pluto and Capricorn for us ever again.
Mm.
Um, Pluto into Aquarius till 2044. And it's an air sign and it's going to revolutionize, transform humanity in the way in which we use information, how that information creates cohesion in society, and also the integration of technology and innovation and artificial intelligence. Uh,
Mm.
so the question is, can this level of humanity integrate AI in a harmonious way that benefits all, or will it be used, you know,
Destructively.
destructively? So
Yeah.
that answer to that question, we'll have to wait probably for this Pluto in Aquarius story to play out, and it's going to take until 2044. There are some real peaks along that journey as well when the nodes move into Aquarius and we have a lot of eclipses. There's a pretty significant eclipse. I can't remember the date. I think it's 2030 something. And it's an eclipse really strongly conjunct the nodes right on Pluto as well. So that's going to be a real sort of punctuated moment in that 20-year period. But if we come back to where we are now, so we've got Pluto into Aquarius. When Uranus, the planet of the higher mind, the intellect, the thought process, like you can think of Mercury as our planet that represents our lower mind, and then Uranus is a more of our higher mind. It's more futuristic driven, it's more detached, it's more objective, it's more, you know, connected to when people have those epiphanies, downloads, ahas, breakthroughs on a mental, that they're getting that light bulb moment. That's
Mm.
usually an impact of Uranian energy coming in.
Wow.
Yeah, so it moves into an air sign. So you got Pluto in an air sign and Uranus in an air sign, and they'll line up via what we call a trine, which is just a relationship between these energies, which connects them very potently and very powerfully. So Pluto in Aquarius, Aquarius is the sign of knowing. So
Mm.
to know, we don't have belief in Aquarius, we have knowing. You know,
Wow.
in Pisces is the sign of belief. So we're challenging, and we have been challenging for quite some time now, a lot of our belief systems. I think that's one of the things that people do on their journey of awakening is they challenge their conditioned belief systems. And we have to believe because we don't know. But once you know something, you have that, you know, that clarity and awareness and that sort of knowing, you don't need a belief anymore.
Yeah.
Uh, I used to believe because when I was little, and I was about 6, when I developed a fear of dying, because the belief system that my parents chose to sort of give me was when you die, that's it. It's all over. Nothing happens. There's nothing. Worms eat your body. And that's it. And I was like, well, you know, I'm a Virgo. So I was like, how long? Forever. How long's forever? Forever. When do I see you again? Never. What about my sibling? Never. When do I come? Do I come at no? What is it? Nothing. That's just.
Poor child.
For some that would have been all right, but for me, I was like, I needed to know, well, what? Hang on, that doesn't make sense. But then obviously, you know, I can't die now because what? thought of that would be just annihilation.
Mm.
So I believed for quite some time in that belief system until I had my own, breakthroughs and my own awakening. And I then discovered for myself along my journey through many different processes, psychological care and psychedelic therapy and meditations and all sorts of things. And now I know that's not true. I know. I don't believe that it's not. Do I know exactly what occurs on the other side? No, I don't know that, but I'm also okay not knowing, but I know it's not what I was told.
Mm.
So there's this sort of certainty that can come with that. So if we go back to what I was suggesting before, is
Mm.
when we have Pluto into Aquarius, Pluto is the collective unconscious. So you could say in the sign of awakening or knowing, we've got the collective unconsciousness is way awakening.
Is
Right.
that part of the age of Aquarius now? Would you
Well,
say?
yeah, there's no consensus in the astrological community on the age of Aquarius. So I find this a very interesting, not a debate, but just discussion of like, are we in it? When is it happening? Did it happen already? I have a lot of different thought processes. I'm not really certain on, but I like to look at it from lots of different points of view. I feel like possibly then we could have moved into the age of Aquarius quite some time ago around the Industrial Revolution, but the clever powers that be have a very cunning program called the Matrix, which is like a web that's cast over people to keep them consciously where they want them. So that did we move into the age of Aquarius, but we were sort of reset, or
Blindsided in a way.
totally. So
Mm.
I feel like that's highly possible. What's happening now, though, is and you could look at the internet as probably one of the key things that sort of helps us understand that, like, that's access to information for everyone. It connects everyone on the
Mm.
very Aquarian.
Mm.
So the invention or the release of the internet, which our access to it was 50 years after it was actually created. So, you go back and say, well, when did this occur? When did this happen? So, having said that, if you look around in the world at the moment and you see the type of reality and the symbolic nature of that reality, it's resonating more in the sort of frequency of Aquarius rather than Pisces.
Mm.
Pisces is the church and the state. So we've got this sort of collapsing of the church and the state, government and religion. And
Yeah.
it,
Relying on a savior, and we're getting out of that now and we're taking our power back.
in the age of Pisces, you have to have a savior god because collectively the consciousness of the people is asleep.
Yeah.
So when people are consciously asleep collectively, they do things, they're lost, right? And they do things to themselves and one another that they're not super conscious of that occurring. They just operating from their conditioning or their programming. So you need a savior God in that age for the people to believe in, to keep society functioning. Whereas when we move into the age of Aquarius, we don't need a savior God. The consciousness that represented is accessible for us within Christ consciousness. And what I see is the awakening of Christ consciousness within people is going to be the tipping point of the age of Aquarius. And in some respects, I frame it like this. We're not waiting for the age of Aquarius. The age of Aquarius is waiting for us
Mm.
in the sense of it's us awakening.
Yeah.
Uh, it's the awakening of that gnosis, that knowing within. So is 2025 has the potential for that type of impact on the collective. Having said that, I put my conspiracy tinfoil hat on. If you look at major astrological alignments, and one could argue both sides of this, is it coincidental or is it intentional?
Mm.
But when we've had significant astrological alignments, even if you're just looking the last 20 years from September 11, there's always been some sort of event associated to it. And those events are usually pre-planned events. So September 11 is an example, COVID, another example.
Mm.
So are they designed to hijack the influence of these shifts within consciousness? I feel like that's probably the case.
Mm. That would make sense.
Yeah. So then I see like potentially that what have they got planned for these shifts in consciousness? to
Yeah.
just maintain their grip of
Yeah.
control.
And
Yeah.
misdirect our progression in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because in for the pandemic, the pandemic, there was a Saturn Pluto conjunction. Their conjunctions occur every 40 years. This was in the sign of Capricorn. There is a lot of ways in which that could impact on the collective, but what happened was the pandemic comes, right? And they've channeled some of the negative qualities of what that represents and utilized it to direct their agenda. So,
Mm.
yeah, it's fucking nefarious and dark.
Yeah.
Is Saturn conjunct Pluto and Capricorn nefarious and dark? No, but it has the potential because if we look at the qualities of these energies, there's a spectrum of influence, and it can be from transcendental energy to really like destructive and that devolution. So I
Yeah.
sort of think about, I hope, because this is what I feel is possible, is that they will try just as they tried and succeeded for September 11 and for COVID in a way.
In a way,
But
yeah.
I think there's always a repercussion, and the
There's
repercussion,
always that risk of people doing the opposite and like seeing through it all.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
if you look pre-COVID to now, exponential awakening of people since COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, exponential.
Maybe not during, but the
Right.
after effects for sure.
I remember 2018 is when I started professionally reading astrology for people, and I had a little Instagram page back in 2018, and I'd get up there and I'd talk about the astrological alignments and that. I was talking like to fuck all people on the internet. On that, there was fuck all people talking about that stuff too.
Mm.
2020, all of a sudden there was an explosion. Now it's exponential. It's exponential, and it's not just astrology; it's everything. There's a lot.
Yeah.
So I would feel then the impact of that has created a higher level of awareness for the vast majority of people. The test is going to be able to act from that high level of awareness or revert back to conditioning, programming, or fear, if that be the case. So I feel like it's hard to predict what may or may not occur
Yeah.
based on astrology, but I would expect there to be some pretty significant events in 2025, possibly orchestrated and also possibly natural as well, because when these outer planets shift signs, they shift modalities and they shift elements. So we're out of the water and earth and we're into fire and air, and they're all going to be in fire and air signs. And they're very active. So things are heating up, things are changing. They change more rapidly too.
Is that related to the fires as well that's happening?
Well, interestingly, when those fires occurred, and again, were they natural or were they naturally occurring, and were they amplified unnaturally, or were they unnaturally actually started? Who knows? We could debate that. And again, we'll probably never know, but we could hypothesize, right? The nodes, so the north node and south node of the moon, which are associated with big karmic shifts, they relate to our eclipses that we have usually twice a year. So the North Node was at 0 degrees of Aries, just about to go back into Pisces when those fires broke out. And Aries is ruled over by Mars. And we had Mars just in retrograde again. Mars is the fiery planet, and Mars was making its opposition to Pluto around that time also. So
Mm.
it's like, whoa, Plutonic type event, very shocking, crisis type event. So again, that's the astrological weather. And what astrology is helping us do is correlate what's happening here to our experience of reality here. Again, is it causing it? I don't think Pluto is causing anything. I think that the planet Pluto is, or whatever that might be, whether it's a terrestrial planet or not, whether it's just a light. I think that the location of it and its motion is a beacon of the frequency of consciousness that represents or that resonates at that.
It's
It's
like
just,
amplifying what where we're at, kind of thing.
yeah, well, let's look at it like this. We've got pure, undifferentiated source energy.
Mm.
That's, we would say that's God. Behind everything the ultra sort of creative principle. So that's undifferentiated energy. And then we've got differentiated energy in manifestation here on the physical plane. So it's got to come from pure source and it's got to differentiate as it does down into physical matter. So as it does that, the creative force that drives that is probably God. If you want to personify that energy, the force that, that's what they say, and you got to use the force. That force, I say, that's that force, whatever that is God. But then it does so, and it unfolds in a sort of divine process. And it does so from a very high frequency to a very low frequency. So once that frequency gets so high, it passes the speed of light and we can no longer perceive it. We can't see it. That doesn't mean it doesn't has existence. It has existence. It's just it's vibrating at a frequency so high, so fast, we can't see it anymore. So then from the visible light spectrum down to physical matter, energy in matter is vibrating at a very low frequency. That's why we can perceive it, we can touch it, we can use it here in the physical plane. So one could argue that's just happening for whatever reason and why that's the mystery of the universe. How did that come about and what's behind, fuck, who knows, right? But because it does so in this sort of divine pattern or process from these different levels of frequency, the planets that are not stuck but sort of positioned within those levels, they point to that expression of energy. So, it's a correlation between the planets and that energy, not a causation. I don't think the planets are what's causing that. I
Yeah.
think some other unifying principle that we could probably call God, right? And that's just an expression of that energy as it comes from source to material matter.
Mm.
And when we know, because we can look to the planets, that's the whole Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. Oh, that's happening there. So therefore, we can expect this to be occurring here. Because there's a correlation. That's one of the Hermetic principle is correlation. So what's happening there is happening here. Is it causing it? Okay, we could debate that. Doesn't really matter if it was or it wasn't, but there's a correlation between it. So we see the correlation of Pluto now, that planet and what it represents in that sign. And then we could understand, well, the experience of consciousness now is going to resonate at that frequency here on the Earth plane. Yeah, so when we have Pluto and then Uranus in both in air signs, they harmonize with one another and their energies sort of communicate really well with one another. So you've got the collective unconscious, you've got the collective higher mind, the conscious mind, and then you've got them both in air signs. So there's going to be some massive Plutonic, Uranian, unexpected shifts, transformations, changes in
Mm.
relation to our air quality, which is all about mind, awareness, perception, thoughts, communication,
Mm.
information. And we've got this AI component at the moment. What I feel that one of the sort of, and it will play right into their agenda, but one of the challenges that will happen, especially when Neptune moves into Aries, one of the challenges is knowing what's real and what isn't real anymore. And AI has brought this next level component here because it can mimic and recreate voices and images and pictures and things. And it's exponentially learning. So computer learning is like exponentially. So it's what it was 2 years ago to now is like phenomenal.
Mm.
What will it be in 3 months? Like it's that quick. It's that quick. So we might get to a point, Pluto in an air sign, Uranus in an air sign, really harmonizing. Then you've got Neptune that's going to sit between those two in Aries. And we might be struggling to grasp reality in the sense of like, well, that's fake, or that isn't real, or what is real?
We're
You
just
know,
questioning things.
totally. And not a shortage of information, an overwhelm of information, too much, like a
Yeah.
flood. And then that could also tie into, well, hang on, everyone now is a threat, potentially, because everyone can fake everything. How do we know what's real and what isn't? What we better do is we better come up with an identification process so we know that is legitimately you. Because otherwise, how do we know it's not you and it's some fakery, it's some Russian bot or something like that, right? And
Mm.
we're going in that direction. So I feel like 2025 is the beginning of this, and they will try. I feel like the long-term outcome beyond this decade, it won't work. I just don't see it working and being integrated and humanity shifting as a result. But having said that, there's going to be casualties along the way. So
It kind of reminds me of the Atlantis fall story. You know how Atlantis fell because of the technology or something like that, you know?
heard that story. Yep.
Yeah,
It feels a little bit like that. Yep.
yeah.
Also, too, you've got the component of Gaia, Sophia, Mother Earth, and the nature spirits. And it's interesting that we could see, especially beyond probably is that May, April, May was a bit of a hot. April in general is a bit of a hot spot because March just kicks us off into this massive April. But once we get into May, we've got so that the sort of progression this year is Mars will be in retrograde till February 24th. And then in March, Venus and Mercury will go retrograde, and that retrograde will tie us right up to the eclipse, the solar eclipse at the end of March on the 30th of March. Very potent solar eclipse, the last one in Aries, even though the nodes have shifted, the actual eclipse is in Aries. And then that takes us into April, and April is the final Mars-Pluto opposition as well. So
Mm.
I feel like April's a real, like, there's a defining turning point happening in April based on the eclipse that occurs at the end of March. And then as we get into, and also around that eclipse is Neptune's moving out of Pisces and into Aries. So that sort of transition. Then Saturn in May will join Neptune in Aries. They don't come together via degrees or conjunction until March of 2026 in Aries. So we've got this sort of like, hey, it's almost like what the fuck moment, and then this pullback and a repetition of this again in early 2026. Once Saturn moves into Aries as well, I feel like we could get some interesting geological changes. And whether that's, volcanic or more fires, wildfires, and things like that, I'd be on the lookout for the Earth representing or reflecting these shifts in energy. Imagine the mass of people here are shifting their consciousness, like becoming more aware, becoming more self-aware. So sort of like the butterfly effect, right? The knock-on effect of that. We're all connected to Earth and everything, the cosmos and energy and everyone and each one of us, right? So if en masse we're shifting, I would expect also the Earth to reflect those shifts and changes. So that's going to be something to be on the sort of lookout and aware of as we get into next year.
So is
Um,
that the Saturn going into Aries? Is that next year?
Yeah, Saturn into Aries next year.
Yeah.
So we've already,
Pisces at the moment.
yeah, Saturn's in Pisces. It's been in
Yeah.
Pisces since 2023.
Okay.
Interesting what happens is both Neptune and Saturn will move into Aries almost together. And
Mm.
then they'll move into Aries and then they stop in retrograde and then they'll go back into Pisces. So Saturn and Neptune back into Pisces is about October this year through to about March next year. So that's why I'm like, oh, it can't really go the whole year. There's just too much going on. But if we look towards now and July and say, okay, well, these are occurring till then, July through till October, even pretty much April this year till October is going to be the hot spot. And then as the planets slow down, stop retrograde, and go back into their previous signs, and they'll all do that. So Saturn will go back into Pisces, Neptune back into Pisces, and Uranus will come out of Gemini and back into Taurus. And then in 2026, they both will move back into the other sign again. So we've had that with Pluto. So Pluto moved into Aquarius in March of 2023. And then it went back into Capricorn, then it went back into Aquarius and back into Capricorn. So that went from March of 2023 right till November of 2024. Pluto was on the cusp and going back and forth of those signs. So the outer planets, because they're slow moving in nature, they'll do the same thing. So it's almost like they activate, they bring this shift, there's changes, and then there's the integration process. It's almost like, oh, what the hell? And then you get a reprieve, and then it returns again in 2026. And that's why really 2025 to 2027 is this story that's going to start this year. And that
Mhm.
story, we'd expect it to go over that period of time because the planets will stay in those parts of the sky. They're going to massage the same points. So it's like their shift could bring changes, and then those changes are going to take some time to play out. So it's not, and I say this a lot to people, it's not what happens, it's how we respond to what happens. And it's not what they do, it's what they want you, how do you want you to react to what they do so they can do what they really want to do, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. The whole
Yeah.
problem, reaction, solution. So
Yeah.
for those on their awakening journey, for those that are questioning things and pulling back, and
Mm.
COVID was a big wake up to them, that sovereignty moving ahead. It's not about alarming about what could happen or when it could happen or where it could happen or how it could happen or what, it's just knowing
Mm.
how you're going to choose to respond to whatever happens.
Yeah.
And if we go back to COVID, we had Pluto and Saturn in Capricorn. It was about Saturn, responsibility, Capricorn, like for your self sovereignty. You're going to be the authority of your life. And you're going to be put into Plutonic crisis in order for you to step up into that sovereignty and authority of your life. So, because they used fear, Saturn in Capricorn, and crisis, Pluto, people weren't able to exercise personal authority at that time. They were overwhelmed by the fear and the programming and the rules and the stuff. So and I say people, I say most people, not everyone. Obviously, a lot of your listeners and my clients and things are on the other side of that. But most people succumbed to that and they couldn't exercise personal responsibility and authority. So they then fell into exactly the response that they wanted.
Yeah.
By doing that, they wanted a response because once they got that response, it allowed them to do what they really wanted to do.
Yeah.
In 2025, doesn't matter what happens. You've got to expect the unexpected. You've got to be very flexible, open, and ready to change and adapt. But it's not what happens, it's how you're going to respond to what happens. And that's what you've got to be really mindful of is like, how am I choosing to respond to this? And if you aren't aware, there'll be a programmed way in which they want people to respond to whatever's happening, and that'll feed into their agenda. And
Mm.
I feel like our role is to choose responsibility of self and authority of ourself, sovereignty of ourself, so that we can say, well, that's not how I'm going to respond, you know? And
Mm.
what happens, it takes a lot of strength and courage to do that. And it's hard because you can feel a little bit like people in COVID, right? I didn't want to be left out. I don't want to be ostracized. So you've got to have a little bit of resilience and inner strength to do that. But what happens too is you become inspiration for those people around you. Those people that are like, oh, I don't really want to do this, but I feel like I'm on my own. And then you step up and say, no, you don't have to do that. Or we can do this instead. Or this is the way I'm going to operate. You become a leader for those people in your community, in your area to know, hey, we don't have to believe that. We don't have to go along with that. There is another choice here. So you're exercising that free will, that responsibility, that authority over your life. And if you can make a commitment now to sort of say, you know what, that's what COVID taught me, and that's what I'll take into 2025. So no matter what's going on, I can choose how I'm responding. That's what I would say is probably the best way to navigate on a big level. Having said that, we're probably going to be looking at a lot of people that are coming to that are shifting awareness now. It's like they could be waking up into a bit of a nightmare and going and losing control of reality and like what the fuck's going on and being overwhelmed. So they're going to need, rather than looking to the government or corporations or what was, the authority through COVID, we need to step up and say, hey, you can look to us, look to
Mm.
one another to sort of
Mm.
help. And understand too that if people are going through mass awakenings, it's not usually like if you look back in your own journey, and especially mine, I didn't wake up and go, life's great. I went, what the fuck? We've been lied to? What? That's not who? How? I was angry. I was angry. Like a lot of my awakening in the early stages, I was fucking angry. I was pissed.
Yeah.
So imagine then a lot of people like waking up. they could be acting out and ungrounded and like, and also overwhelmed and like help. So
Mm.
I feel like that those that already have a higher awareness, and higher is not better, it's just different. It's just more, you see more, have a sort of responsibility. So exercising that in this year ahead is going to be really important. Another thing that I feel like we'll be confronting, so the lunar nodes have moved now into Pisces and Virgo. South node is in Virgo, North node is in Pisces. And this axis in particular deals a lot with health and well-being on a physical level as well as on a mental, emotional, and spiritual level. So we're getting a real wake-up call in relation to our own life. We're going to get more integrity to step into our spiritual health and well-being and integrating that into our lives. And again, unique for everyone. So what works for one is not for another. And you can be spiritual as fuck while you're doing your groceries at Woolies if you wanted to be. You know, it's not like about going and grabbing crystals and going off into an ashram and becoming all one with the universe. Like there is unique pathways for everyone, but coming to the realization that there is something going on beyond just this physical existence and forming a relationship with what that might be. And then we're saying, well, how do I integrate that into my life and my way of being? So
Mm.
changes with the way in which we deal with our spiritual health. Having said that, we've also got to deal with the repercussions or outcome of 2020. And that's going to be a big theme for this year as well. I would say that the health system is going to be put under extreme pressure. In the health
Mm.
system, we've got that Virgo Pisces axis. And then we also have Saturn and Neptune into Aries, into the zero Aries energy. So Neptune has a is dissolving effect. And Saturn, the planet Saturn, is what we call in fall in the sign of Aries. So when a planet's in fall, its impact is felt more physically in our reality. We definitely have a more literal expression of that energy, but also it has a weakening effect. So with Saturn, we've got authority, we've got rules, we've got boundaries, we've got like law and order sort of thing. So we might have a weakening of those things.
Mm.
But in the sign of Aries is like pure will force. Yeah. So the Sun and Mars are the two planets that represent willpower. And the Sun rules Leo, but is exalted in Aries. Because in Leo, it's fixed, it's just a quality of that essence or being or expression. Whereas in Aries, it's a cardinal sign. So, cardinal suggests that there is motion to the energy, there's a direction to it, and it's very directed. So, Aries with the fire in a cardinal expression is directed. It's like expressed externally. So it deals with a lot of willpower, right? And the expression of willpower. So you got Saturn, which is like limitation, restriction, and coming into a real literal like expression of that because the planet's in fall. And then you've got Neptune, which dissolves, has a disillusioning type experience. So in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces for 2012, I think, till now. And we've had a massive sort of spiritual awakening because what's happening is that Piscean realm, Neptune has made it more accessible to us.
Mm.
Now it goes into Aries. Now, what we could see on a mass scale, because Neptune also is a planet that represents things on a bigger scale. So if there's ever anything going on a world like hugely affecting a lot of people, there's usually a Neptunian type influence because there is no boundaries to the expression of that energy. So, you know, Jupiter can make things bigger, but only to the extent of what Saturn allows. So you can only blow up a balloon to the point of it's in the physical realm. So at a certain point, the stress and tension pops. That stress and tension is the boundary that Saturn creates because it's
Mm.
physical, right?
Yeah.
Jupiter grows things, but there's a limit. Neptune is outside of the orbit of Saturn, so it expands things forever beyond. So it can be this real expansiveness. So it
Wow.
can help to elevate consciousness and awareness and transcendent type experiences because you can literally go into it like merged into the oneness. You bring it back to the Aries energy, Aries being willpower, and you can have this disillusion, restrictive loss of will, or what we call life force as well. So you might have a depleting of life force energy. And you have the nodes going through this karmic energy that's going through Pisces and Virgo, dealing with the health and well-being on a physical, spiritual level, or a physical, emotional level, or a physical, mental level, or a combination of those. So when we have our eclipses across that axis, we're having karmic endings and undoings. So if we've got souls that are at that point and there's a disillusion of their willpower or an impact on their health based on, Saturn was interestingly placed through the COVID period and at the end of COVID in the 0 degrees of Aquarius. You reap what you sow with Saturn. He's the planet or lord of karma. And karma isn't you've been bad and now you're paying the price. Karma is there was an action that created an experience, and this is the consequences of those experiences.
Yeah.
The repercussions on a health level in relation to also people's life force, there's going to be a real sort of peak to that April, May, June, July, as Saturn and Neptune line up in Aries, and we've got these nodes now into Pisces and Virgo. The second set of eclipses this year will be in September as well.
Mm.
So, how do you navigate that? And we could be
Mm.
dealing with a lot of people transitioning and dealing with death on many different fronts and many different causes. I always say to people, the dead don't suffer. That's the end of the life is the end of the suffering. It's the soul's transitioning. It's the soul's like resting place. Yeah. So it's we that suffer because why?
Mm.
Because we can't let go. Now, what we've got to come to terms with, irrespective of the cause, how, when, why, who, all of that, we've got to accept that soul's positioned itself in a situation in its life for the transition to take place. And that's sacred for that person, that soul.
Yeah.
And that even if it's under terrible circumstances, we've got to understand the lessons that soul is going through at that moment are very unique and personal, and not for us to intervene within it all. And it
Yeah.
can help frame death in a way that makes it there's purpose to it, even if it comes on accidentally at the hands of another or at a young age. There's purpose to it. Do we know what that purpose is? No, it's not for us. It's not our soul's journey. But that soul will know when they transition onto the other side. I've done a lot of work in 2024 with David the Medium. I was at quite a few of his live events. I was presenting for him,
Mm.
and he talks to the dead. And even people that die in horrific accidents and sort of things, they want reassurance for the living souls to say, I didn't suffer. I was gone before that point, sort of thing. So we've got to understand that the soul is resting now. They're at peace. They're free from the bondage of the physical
Yeah.
world and the challenges and stresses on that. So what we've got to do is make peace with it and let them go. And it's not to not grieve. To grieve is to love. So
Mm.
of course to grieve, but also to make peace,
Yeah.
and let it go. And
Is that going to be for 19 years or something? Because I know that I was reading somewhere that the south and north nodes have like an 18 to 19 year cycle. Is that how it works?
yes, so that's a good thing for people at home wanting to understand what some of these alignments might mean. The nodes have a cycle, they go 18 years through the signs, and
Mm.
every 9 years they're in opposite signs. So
Okay.
when you're understanding what is the North Node in Pisces, what could it mean for me? Go back 18 years ago. So you want to go back 2006, June 2006 through to the end of 2007.
Okay.
That was the last time the North Node was in Pisces. And what you want to do is not so much go, what was happening in my life, but how was I responding to what was happening in my life? And what was my behavior and my patterns of expression, habits, all of that at that point. And we've got this sort of ending of that phase now, a new cycle beginning. So that's a useful exercise for people. When I'm reading astrology, I'm always saying, when I
Mm.
see certain alignments, if I see it's a repeating pattern, I'll go, well, what happened 2 years ago? I'll be
Mm.
like, oh, that's when I met this, asshole. Okay, okay, that's coming to an end. Or at least a new cycle has been developing.
Yeah,
So,
that
um,
makes sense. I get that now. Thanks for explaining that.
the North and South Node will be in Pisces Virgo right through for 18 months or so, a year and a half. And what that represents, not so much, unless the North and South Node in Pisces, you have personal planets or one of your ascendants in those areas, then you'll have either the north or south. No, I'm a Virgo, you're a Pisces, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll have the north node coming across your sun. I'll have the south node coming across my sun. So it's two different expressions of energy. Usually with the south node, we're letting go of things. We're overcoming pa habits, patterns, and the past. So we can have this sort of releasing type experiences like that ended. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not being that anymore. With the north node, we've got circumstances, people, events, opportunities coming in to help us grow into the direction our soul wants us to. And then the other thing that the nodes represent is our eclipse cycles. So we get a lunar eclipse in March around the 14th, 15th, I think. And that is in Pisces Virgo axis. Then we have a solar eclipse, but it's in Aries because it's the actual lunation happens in Aries. And then when we get into September this year, and then we'll have eclipses for the next 12 months in Pisces and Virgo. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so again, if you're following along at home, you look to the chart, your birth chart, and you say, which houses are my Pisces house and my Virgo house? And that helps you go, oh, okay, that's going across my fourth house, 10th house. This is going to relate to my domestic life, my home life, my real estate, where I live, versus my career or my worldly goals and pursuits, my public identity. And that's
Mm.
what changes are going to occur based on the eclipses.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
That's a lot.
There's
Hey.
a lot. There's a lot. There's a lot. It's gonna be a big year. Jupiter is also moving signs, so
Mm.
pretty much Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto already did it, but it's just the beginning stages. They're all moving signs in 2025, all within 6 months of each other. They all transition into new signs, so that's significant. Actually, Neptune and yeah, so pretty much from April to July. So April, May, June, July. Within 4 months, all the planets, all the outer planets, except for Pluto, because it's already done it, are changing signs. So if you wanted to go back into history to find when something like this has occurred, you have to go back out of the age of Pisces. It didn't happen in this age.
Wow.
It's possibly beyond 5,000 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, and then one could argue the the awareness of the outer planets wasn't known, and only in modern times was only known since 1700 when Uranus was discovered first, Neptune in 1800, and Pluto in the 1900s. So even though they've been spoken of mythologically, we've understood them as a
Mm.
collective in a consciousness, but we haven't actually been able to identify them until modern science supposedly, because our history is a mystery because it's been hijacked. So, based on what we know, and if new evidence comes to light, we change what we know. So, yeah, it's a very significant astrological year because it hasn't happened in Christ knows how long. It's going to be really hard to know exactly what may occur. What I would say to people is that never before in, I reckon, the last couple of thousand years, have we as a people had an opportunity to be more aware and also more in control of the direction in which we take this world.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think that's a positive thing. But if we want to change the world, we've got to exercise responsibility and we've
Mm.
got to exercise that strength and that courage, and we've got to be in integrity as well. So
Yeah.
that's going to be the challenges as we go into this next year, and it'll test us. It'll test us, and not everyone's going to pass that test.
Mm.
But that's the reality we're in.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I was reading as well, I don't know if it was the 25th of January where all the planets align or something like that. Is
Yeah, so that's an astronomical alignment, not an astrological one. But they'll line up in the sky, so you'll be able to look to them astrologically.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
astronomically. Yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
it doesn't really mean anything astrologically.
When I'm looking at astrology, I'm looking at what they represent in relation to our energetic experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So astronomy deals with that's where it is, that's how big it is, that's how far away it is. You know? Okay, cool. But they don't really consider, oh, it's this quality and it's in this sign and it's
Yeah.
related, connected to that planet. So therefore, you know what I mean? That's astrology. And astronomy and astrology used to be one and the same 500 years ago, but there was a bit of a split and modern science went one way and now they view astrology as pseudoscience, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But to what the consequences of that, well, we don't have any. metaphysics or energetic sort of component to our health system. And you could
Mm.
say that's probably one of its fundamental flaws in the
Yeah.
health system is that we haven't integrated, they've divorced it from the metaphysical and from the spiritual. And that's why it's not a health system, it's a sick system. And it's not designed to get you better. It's designed to just mask your symptoms.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that the health system is crap, because there's some phenomenal sort of breakthroughs with science and with technology and with how they can treat people and, medicines and stuff like that. Absolutely. But
Mm.
it's not integrative of this other component, and that I feel is its downfall.
Yeah.
Um, Having said that, we as a people, we get to choose how we recreate this world and this direction for this world. And I feel like you're going to see, probably beyond 2030, you're going to see more awakened people coming into medicine and science and politics and all
Mm.
these types of things. And it's going to lift all of those things. I feel it needs to get to that point where we can integrate the two
Yeah.
rather than be at war with one another.
Yeah. I definitely think there is a place for conventional medicine, but how it is being used now is not helping how it could be or should be. It's just making people sicker. So,
It's a business designed to generate wealth,
mm,
and a model doesn't want healthy people.
no.
I've witnessed it in my own life with my family and things, and that they're so quick to diagnose, to prescribe medicine. And
Mm,
it's like, okay, you're not dealing with the cause of. I had an issue in 2007, and I ended up self-diagnosing, self-treating, and overcoming it. But three doctors and a specialist were like, take this, take this." And I'm like, "Yeah, but what's causing it? We don't know. We don't know. We don't know." And they weren't even interested in trying to find out.
mm,
And that's a lot of the issue I see in illness. The body is a fundamentally divine instrument. Like, it's the temple, right? And it's going to communicate. Most of our language, in actual fact, is body language, cues and things that are happening within the body. When you're speaking to someone, like, I think 80 or 85% of communication is nonverbal. It's body language. So the body has a way to communicate to us. It just doesn't say, "Hey, Luke, stop drinking that and don't eat that," or "Stop
mm.
thinking these negative thoughts," or "Stop repressing that emotion because you're pushing that. I'm having to hold that for you," right?
Yeah.
Do that, and the body goes, "Okay, we can do that. We can do that." Okay, so now by that process over a period, now I'm ill because of it.
Mm,
So we don't look at what caused the illness.
exactly.
Look at, "Oh, here, take this to fix the illness."
Mm,
Even the way in which we deal with cancer, and I tell people this a lot in my sessions, is that a lot of people will feel like they're dealing with toxic friends, family, and etc. by cutting them out, like cutting them off, cut them away. I don't have anything to do with you anymore. And you can do the cutaway if you are healed, but if you're not healed and you cut away, you're actually doing what they do with cancer. And then they say, "Oh, you got cancer, we'll just cut it out." Hang on, hang on, hang on. What caused it? What caused the cancer? How did your body start to metastasize cells and grow this cancerous thing? Why did it do that? "Oh, we don't know, so we just cut it out, cut it out." Usually that process, what happens? It comes back somewhere else. You cut out a family member because they're toxic. Yeah, they come back somewhere else. And now instead of I'm dealing with toxic mum, I've got this bitch at work that's reminding me of my mother. Do you know what I
it's
mean?
so true because they're mirroring a part of you that needs to be healed. And I really agree with that because I've seen it happen in my life. If you try and run away from something, it will show up in other ways. You got to face it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
Overcoming it, transcending it, rising above
that's
it.
it. Yeah.
And acceptance. We're all fucked up. We are. We're all lost. We're all hurt. We're all fucking finding our way. We're all just emerging from, like, Neo in the Matrix, right? And he's comes out of the thing. He's like, "What the fuck's going on?" We're like that. We're just at that stage. We're not advanced, and we can't then expect anything really of anyone or anything. We can't, because we're pushing that expectation onto someone that's just like us, fucked up, hurt,
Mm,
lost. And, so we got to learn to accept. Okay, cool. Rather than expect, accept, just accept.
Love it.
Yeah. But
Uh,
nice place to be, especially as we get into this next little
yeah.
mission for us.
Any last advice or summary for these next 6 months for everyone?
Yeah, awareness above fear.
Mm,
Awareness. It's part of being sovereign and taking personal responsibility and becoming the authority of your life is you've got to exercise that ability to have awareness. You can't avoid or deny or want everything to be peace, love, and mung beans. You've got to accept that in this physical reality, sometimes the hyenas gang up and eat the lion, and it's sad, but that's the reality. So, it's like, oh, we've got to kill all the hyenas because of the poor lion. Like, fuck, we've got to accept. Okay. So you have awareness and you take that awareness in and you go, okay, this world, we're starting to wake up to this fuckery in this world that's been going on at a level we've been unaware of for fucking a long time, a very long time. Like
mm,
it's not just, this is nothing new under the sun here. And we're only just waking up to that. Okay, cool. So I need to learn how to navigate that. I can't be like, why are they doing that? How are they doing that? They shouldn't do that. It should be just like, okay, that's what's happening. And it's again, I'll refer back to what I said earlier. It's not what's happening, it's how you're responding to what's happening. So you exercise your sovereignty when you then choose your response to any circumstances. And that's something to be mindful of as we go through this year is it's not what could or couldn't happen or who said that Trump's going to be assassinated. Doesn't really matter, right? If you get caught up in trying to understand and know and all of that, Jupiter and Gemini until June, yeah, too much information and who knows what's real and what isn't real. Everyone's got an agenda, everyone's coming from different points. It's like it's an overwhelm. So rather than trying to work it out and get it like that, now I know, just realize you don't know. No one fucking knows. We're doing the best we can trying to work that out, but you exercise a level of discernment, objectivity, detachment, and say, well, you know what? I'm prepared for anything, no matter what happens. I know in me what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do, what I'm
yeah.
willing to do, and therefore I'm free. I'm free, in
Yeah.
the sense that I can just go, well, I'm not doing that, or I am going to do that, or let
Mm,
me do something different. So that's somewhere to be, I feel like, and use this Mars retrograde until the end of February to just pull back a little bit and redirect your energy, rethink about how you're using your energy and where
yeah.
you're putting your focus and your energy. And that's really important. That's another part of being sovereign is like that's your energy. Like you're choosing to give it to that or give it to that or resist that or be angry about that. Okay, cool. So make sure you're aware that's what's happening. Because if you're reactive, 2025 is not where you want to be. We're going in from earth and water to the outer planets into fire and air. There's going to be a lot of reasons to be reactive. So cool.
Yeah.
Start getting a little bit Pisces and Virgo nodes now. I better get my Zen going on. Fine. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you, Luke. Well, we'll get you back on in 6 months and
Sometime in July, we should pencil it
July.
in because we'll have a lot of data from July. From now,
Yeah.
and we'll go, oh my God, this and that and that and that. And that's
Done.
the thing too, you start to correlate life experience to the cosmos, and then you start to see patterns emerge, and then it becomes fun because you're like, oh, that's happening. And you're
Mm.
like, oh, yeah, I expect that to be happening during one of these.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I look forward to it. We'll reassess the past 6 months and then talk about the next 6 months in July.
Let's lock it in.
Thanks, Luke. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dee. Cheers.